Hello, everybody, and welcome to Primal Talks today. I'm one of your hosts, Jody Diton, and I'm joined by the ever-lovely Christine Bailey today again. Hi, Christine. You all right?
I'm doing well.
Excellent. Happy Easter, even though Easter's now
yes,
over.
And to you, yeah. I'm happy because we sort of got through the sort of sugar rush of the Easter Sunday. Although I actually make my kids an egg themselves, so actually the amount of chocolate they get is quite limited because I put a toy inside and they're much more keen on the toys because it's superheroes. So yes, that's a really good way of cutting down the sugar.
I don't know about you, my kids are most excited about just collecting up the eggs. After the fact, the eating it kind of seems like a bit of an anticlimax. So I'm really quite lucky that we managed to get away with giving them the chocolate and then taking it back.
Exactly. Mine seem to have competitions about how long they can make it last as well. So, you know, they will often just nibble a tiny bit each day and then they'll make it last, which is great again. I don't mind.
Oh, brilliant. See, now had we done this last week, we could have had bunny ears today.
Yes, that's true.
With our Christmas theme, but we'll remember for next time. We'll have to look at the calendar on our dates are. So what do you have coming up, Christine? What exciting things are you going to be at?
So I have just today finished another book. I know, yeah. So really excited. It's actually going to be out in July, so not even that long to wait. And it's an interesting one because I've written a book which is about helping people lose weight, but on a vegan diet. Because a lot more people are now shifting, whether they're going totally vegan or whether they're just shifting more to plant-based foods. But one of the difficulties is that a lot of books out there, a lot of recipes out there are very low protein for vegans. And if you think about it, that makes sense because when you take out the eggs and the dairy in a vegetarian diet, you have what? Beans, pulses, tofu, lentils, nuts and seeds, a bit of avocado, things like that. But actually, when you put it together to get a reasonable amount of protein per day, it's not overly easy. So that's been my focus, is how do I make this healthy fats, high protein? And you know, and that's relevant to what we're talking about today anyway, which is about children's health. But very interesting, very interesting.
Is that book just finished or is that book now like published?
It will be out in July.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So not long.
Your smoothie book was out in January. Gut health book is coming out.
Yeah. I've got cooking
next month. Yeah. Which is fantastic, and then another one in July.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So that is great news, and it's been great for my kids because they've basically been eating vegan for the last month and loving it, absolutely loving it. And it's interesting because even my teenager, he went for about a year, he went vegetarian, but then went back to eating meat and really likes his meat. He's probably been the one that's loved it the most.
Really?
Yeah, really interesting. You know, and he's a teenager. He eats all the time, and you know, he's loved them. Absolutely loved them.
You're not vegan.
No, but I do eat a lot of vegan meals. I eat fish. I don't really eat a lot of meat, but because I'm much more paleo focused, again. It's very difficult to be vegan and paleo. You can be pegan, probably what I am. So I eat fish, but I do eat, a lot of vegetarian vegan meals. I don't do dairy, but I would eat eggs. So, you know, it's not a very heavy meat diet at all that I eat. I just, you know, genetically, it doesn't suit me.
Okay. And you were just telling me earlier, you're going to be at FitPro. So anybody out there, any trainers and whatnot who'll be attending.
Yeah, really excited about FitPro. FitPro, for those of you in the know, is very much about supporting fitness professionals, sharing best practice and the latest research. And I actually see a lot of personal trainers as clients. And one of the reasons is because they are all suffering from adrenal burnout or overtraining syndrome, we call it. So they've invited me to talk for about an hour on how do you recognize the signs and symptoms of overtraining? Does it affect you? Does it affect your clients? Are they actually training too hard and actually compromising the results and even potentially damaging their health long term. So that could be a really good topic for us to talk about sometime, because I think it affects a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. And are you going to be at the Natural and Organic show again this year?
Yay! I'm doing 2 demos each
Are you?
day. So one is going to be on superfoods and anti-aging, and the other one is on gut health. So I'll be showing people how to make their own kimchi, which is gorgeous. I love it, and so easy. And then of course we're coming to you.
Yes,
gut health as well.
Yes, and your new book will be there in shop as well, so people could be able to get the book, which would be fantastic. And I'm really excited for the Natural and Organic show this year, because we're looking to get some new products in, see what new things are happening. I can't wait. That's brilliant. And that's where we met last year. So that'll be the first.
Yeah, and there's a whole range of new products coming out. Interestingly, quite a lot around the gut health, a lot around raw, a lot around superfoods. And it'll be interesting because, of course, with the emphasis now on cutting sugar down and the sugar tax coming in, it'll be interesting to see how that's changing the new product development, because it will have an impact. There's no question about it. And I think you'll see a lot more shifting away from fruit juices, to healthier options.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. No. Definitely. I'll be quite interested to see what we can find out that we can bring into the shop. It'll be really good.
Yeah.
Just one thing I'd like to mention to anybody who's watching: we do our next seminar at Roost is going to be on April the 20th. We have an external company coming in and running an essential oils session. It's doTERRA essential oils. So that's 7 p.m. on Wednesday, April the 20th, for anybody who's looking to come. And Christy and I have had so many requests for people who want to do your children's cooking course. And I know you have the busy schedule, but so many people that I've talked to, I could probably fill one just with the people that have been into the shop recently, and from my own friends who are desperate to come along. Another friend of mine has just decided last week she's turning paleo, and she's a week in and just baffled by how amazing she feels, wants to get the kids doing a bit of healthy cooking.
Yeah. It was, you know what? We had such a brilliant day. The kids were amazing. They loved it all. The food that we produced was not only healthy, but just spectacular. They so loved it. They took trayfuls home. They all got goodie bags. I mean, they were buzzing. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, it looked brilliant, because you even had great sponsors on board giving great goodie bags. So we will be watching this space.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
But come the fall, I'll be a key person telling those places, and I'll be putting myself on one with my kids, because they're desperate.
Well, they'll love it.
Well, that's a great kind of introduction, because what we're talking about today is healthy kids. Because one of the main things we get coming into the shop is we have a lot of parents coming in, and they are transitioning their diets. They're transitioning for themselves. They want to eat better, and they really don't know, with the transitions that they're making in their own diet, what parts of it they should be taking on board with their own kids. Should they be full-fledging, moving into this healthy eating? What benefits are there? What things do they need to be looking for? So I really want us to focus on how do we make our kids as healthy as possible and give them the best start to move through and learn habits they can take into adulthood.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a very, very good question, because a lot of people also assume that their diet should immediately be suitable for a child, and yet actually the nutritional needs of a child are very, very different. And if you think, particularly as a child goes through that sort of 11, 12, almost adolescent type movement, there is an incredible amount happening to their body physiologically. It's actually the most rapid change that they will ever do in their life in terms of peak bone mass, hormonal development. They have an increased need for certain nutrients and so on. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what you eat or the quantity or the frequency will automatically be suitable for your child. And it's probably worth us mentioning that. So, one of the things that I often get asked is, well, how much should a child be eating?
I'm going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
So the first thing to say is children's appetites vary. Now, I'm making quite a general statement here because I'm looking at, you know, when we came to do a talk at your place, we had people that had babies, toddlers, and teenagers. So obviously, you know, what we say today is going to be, you're going to have to change it slightly depending on the age of your child. But it's worth mentioning children's appetites vary. They will need food frequently. You know, they need to have snacks. You know, often adults snack because we're just bored.
Yeah.
You know, it's got nothing to do whether we need it. We don't really need snacks unless you're training really hard, etc., etc. But children do. And the first thing you need to do is you need to stabilize their blood sugar, because they will often have smaller appetites. And you need to therefore make sure that what you're giving them at each of those meals will stabilize blood sugar. And the easiest way to do that is to start the day with some protein, and to make sure every snack and every meal is rich in protein. So what I mean by protein is meat, fish, beans, pulses, eggs. For older children, there's no reason why you can't include a bit of protein powder if you want to. Nuts and seeds to some extent, not overly high in protein, but they will contain some. But a combination of that with some
yogurt, things like that as well, are those a decent thing to add in for breakfast? Because a lot of parents think, well, give them yogurts with some fruit.
Yeah, Greek yogurt, yes. If you look at the protein content of Greek yogurt, it's higher than most of the others. But I would still probably add in, say, some nuts and seeds to that as well. So you could, for example, you know, in practical terms, it would mean, you know, a pot of Greek yogurt, plain, not the sugar stuff, with, say, a couple of tablespoons of nuts and seeds.
Okay.
Obviously, it might be slightly more or less depending on the age of your child. For a young child, it would mean an egg. For older children, 2 eggs.
Okay.
Or effectively their palm size, a portion of meat or fish. So the
morning, getting your child to sit down, like, it's taken a big adjustment for me to be now to go, you know what, I'm quite happy to just have leftovers for dinner for breakfast.
Yeah, well, that's what my kids have. Yeah.
Children aren't quite there yet. How do you feel about processed foods like bacon and sausages? Because, you know, they're not, I know they're not brilliant, but if they can eat that, is that better than not giving them protein at breakfast?
That's a tricky one, because as you're quite aware, the government's requirements or the government's recommendations is to cut down on processed meat, and that includes children as well. Processed meat, there's no question, has been linked to certain types of cancer, and it's high in salt. For very small children, you need to watch the salt level because, you know, quite frankly, their kidneys are not as efficient as excreting salt. Now, I mean, I'm not overly worried about my children adding a bit of salt to their meals because we don't really do processed food at home. And really, the salt is found in processed foods, you know, cans of baked beans, even tomato sauces, you know, obviously ready meals, crisps, salted nuts and seeds.
Sausages and bacon, they're so salty.
Exactly. So you would have to watch it. I've got no problem with them saying have it once a week. But, you know, I would rather they just had some slices of chicken breast that you could buy ready cooked, ready prepared from a deli, you know, or, you know, Waitrose or Tesco's or whatever deli. So I've got no problem with them having that. And likewise, ham, you know, my kids will have ham from time to time, but I don't like them having it every day.
Yeah.
And again, of course, it's all to do with variety in the child's diet. The key thing is, you know, get them to start looking at their plate and saying to you, Mum, where is my protein? And if you can't say where the protein is, you need to rethink the plate. So really, at least a quarter of their plate, however big their plate is, and obviously it'll be smaller for smaller children, it should be protein. And
what is the benefit, just so people are aware, what is the benefit? Why are we wanting to put more protein in at breakfast? Because obviously the majority of people would think of breakfast as being cereal and toast. And it's quick, it's easy. You pour the cereal in the bowl, you add the milk, 5 minutes, you're done. This is just making life much more complicated. Yeah.
And that's why I'm sort of emphasizing it at breakfast, because that's often the meal that people slip down. So a couple of things. Obviously, children are growing and developing. They're not just needing energy to get through the day. They actually need it to build their bones, their muscles, to provide the basis of neurotransmitters and hormones, and to support the immune system. All of those require protein. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, when you eat something in the morning, your blood sugar will be low in the morning, because you've basically gone through 8, for some children, maybe longer, overnight, not eating anything. And when you don't eat, obviously your blood sugar will start to fall. So you often will wake up in the morning with fairly low blood sugar. That's why a doctor will always test your fasting glucose first thing in the morning when you haven't eaten. So if you then eat a bowl of sugary cereal, or cereal full stop, which is high in carbohydrate, what you're actually doing is you're flooding your body with a high level of glucose instantly. Well, you might think, well, what's the problem if my blood sugar's low? But the problem is your pancreas will then produce lots of insulin. And insulin's role is to take that sugar from your blood into your cells to use it for energy. That's fine, except for it will overproduce energy because you've just given it a huge amount of sugar to deal with. And what will happen is your blood sugar will then crash very soon. Yeah, so you'll get a seesaw. So it will be high because you've just eaten, and then your body overcompensates and produces too much insulin, and effectively you will have a sudden sink in blood sugar. Now, when that happens, your child will lose all comprehension of rationality. Your child will become irritable, moody, hungry, and will demand more food, will not be able to concentrate at school. And often, particularly with the teenagers, will become quite moody. Yeah. What you want is blood sugar to remain stable. Exactly. You want it to remain stable throughout the day. Of course, it will do a slight,
a small oscillation,
because that regulates your appetite. You know, when your blood sugar dips, that's when you start feeling hungry. But if it crashes, you will just be, not be able to focus on anything and just want the nearest chocolate fix or caffeine fix if you're older to pick it back up. By adding protein, by adding some fat to a meal, what you actually do is you slow down the rate of release of anything that you're eating. So if you have, say, a piece of toast, whether it's paleo or not, and you add some protein to it, like scrambled egg, you will slow down how quickly that sugar is released. If you just eat the toast on its own, you'll get a high surge. Even if it's whole grain, you'll get a surge. Yeah. So it's not saying you can't have carb, it's saying add the protein and you will have a much more balanced blood sugar. Yeah. And of course, it is providing the basis of all the hormones, all the neurotransmitters that help you think and feel, and also your immune system. Is giving you those basic amino acids that your body needs. Your body doesn't actually need carbohydrate from food because you can generate energy. But what it does need, it needs those amino acids. There's 9 which are called essential for a reason, because we cannot actually make them. We have to get them from food we eat. Yeah.
So we need those amino acids from proteins, and we need the healthy fats.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning that, particularly if you have a child that's, say, going through 10, 11, 12, adolescence time, that is a real period of rapid growth and development. So their protein needs are actually quite high. So, and, I don't want you to start sticking your child on a scale and start calculating. Effectively, if you give them protein at each meal, and they probably will want, the odd snack, particularly once they get home from school, they're often starving, or if they are doing some exercise, say they go to an after school club or they're going to a training club, they'll probably need something straight after that as well.
But it's worth reflecting in your snacks as well.
Yeah,
not
protein.
Snacks, fruit juices, bags of crisps, things like that. Because again, it's going to have the same impact in the long run, isn't it?
And it's not only that, it's empty calories. So you're filling them up without actually giving them any nutrients. So I would rather they had, a handful of nuts and seeds, or like you just said, some Greek yogurt with a bit of fruit or nuts and seeds. Or you could make your own smoothie up by adding some avocado or nut butter to it, or some almond milk. You know, maybe add some greens to it as well. That, you know, they often don't know if there's a bit of fruit in there as well. Or it could be, you know, a homemade protein bar or protein ball. I mean, I've got loads on my website that are free. Or, you know, if you're not paleo and you're eating, say, oatcakes, a couple of oatcakes, nut butter. I mean, it doesn't have to be something exotic or complicated, you know. A lot of my athletes will just have, you know, some chicken or fish or a pot of cottage cheese if they're doing dairy. So, you know, it doesn't have to be very complicated, but it is worth me mentioning your child will have an increased demand for calcium, for phosphorus, for magnesium and vitamin D, and all of those are important for their bone health. The peak bone sort of laying down is in that early teen phase. So
where are the best places to get those? What foods are they going to be rich in?
Okay, so, you know, everyone will go for calcium from dairy, obviously. It doesn't have to be from dairy. The only reason why that makes a contribution is because, you know, we're quite lazy and we don't eat a lot of nuts and seeds and greens. But calcium is found in a huge range of foods, from beans and pulses to tahini, which is sesame seed paste. In fact, that's one of the best sources. You know, just a teaspoon of that will give you a huge amount. But if you're not doing dairy, then you could do fortified almond milks or, you know, nut milks. Hemp milk is actually very good. Obviously, you know, some people might be doing soy. I'm not a big fan of soya, but, you know, it does have its place, particularly in vegetarian diets. But also leafy greens actually contain a huge amount, and they also contain additional nutrients that your bones need, like magnesium. Vitamin D is a hard one. Whatever diet you're following, vitamin D is a hard one. Really, you need to get out in the sunlight and, you know, without sunscreen for 15 to 20 minutes every day. At this time of year, you're not even going to get much vitamin D, even if you did that. So really,
my window and it ain't happening.
Exactly. I mean, you know, and how many of us actually get a time to go out? So, I mean, your best source.
Exposure. You need your skin to see it. So to walk outside now with only my face exposed isn't quite going to do the job.
It's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen. So, I mean, food sources are limited. Oily fish, liver, cod liver oil, mushrooms. That's about it, really. You know, there aren't that many good food sources, and let's face it, how many of us eat liver and how many children eat liver? You know, so you know, it's
okay, and that's as good as it gets.
So I normally suggest people supplement, but it's worth doing a skin prick test to find out what your levels are, because you can overdose on vitamin D. And the other one that it's definitely worth just looking at your child and thinking, I wonder if they need a top up, is iron, because iron contributes to their normal cognitive development. It's absolutely essential for thinking, memory, immune system, energy. And remember, of course, you know, if you've got a child, you've got a girl who's just starting menstruation, their needs are going to be higher. And, you know, that's happening earlier and earlier these days. 11, 12-year-olds often will be starting their periods. So there is an increased need for iron. And often it's worth saying that teenagers often will go through phases of saying, I don't want to eat meat, I'm going to go vegan, vegetarian. And your need will be increased if you are not eating meat. Yes, you can absorb iron from spinach, you can absorb it from beans and pulses and kale, etc. But though a lot of those vegetables also contain oxalates, which can interfere with iron absorption. So, you know, if you are going veggie, or your child insists on going veggie, and I've got no problem with that at all, having just written a vegan book, they should be having, say, some fruit or some red pepper or something high in vitamin C at the same time, because that will enhance the absorption. It makes a big difference, actually.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we mentioned, we were talking about earlier before we started actually recording, was the Eat Well guide.
Yes, yes.
As we started talking about, we've talked about our breakfast plate. We need to get protein and some fats onto the plate. So I've got, for everybody to have a look, this is the Eat Well guide. You can find it online. It's the government guidelines of what a plate should look like. So this was based for an adult, because you can see it on the very bottom when you go onto the website, it's showing your adult sizes.
Yeah.
Is it the same plate for a child? And would you...
No.
Now, you know me, so you know that I'm paleo for myself. And I always question, just for myself with my children, do they have a higher demand for carbohydrates? Because my kids are quite active. We, they swim competitively multiple times a week. We go to CrossFit on Saturdays. So sometimes by 10:30 a.m., my son has done 2.5 hours of training. And surely in his diet, there's got to be a greater need with him growing for carbohydrates than potentially I would have taken myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's worth mentioning that, when we talk about carbohydrates, you can do carbohydrates on a paleo diet. So that's the first thing. You don't have to be non-paleo for a child. A child can follow a paleo diet, absolutely. There's no question about that. But what you do need to have a think about is look at your child. So look at their behavior. Are they getting very fatigued, tired? Are they suffering with hunger a lot? Are they, struggling, for example, with sleep even? Because some of this can be linked to very low carbohydrate diets. And they are growing and developing. They do need a lot of nutrients, and they do need that energy. And if you're working out for 2 hours, absolutely you need some carbohydrate. Now, that doesn't mean he has to eat grains, because he could get that from vegetables, from fruit, from sweet potato, from yams, from plantains, from beetroot, butternut squash. They're all starchy and they're counted carbs. Yeah. And likewise, if you're vegetarian, then beans and pulses actually do contain a reasonable amount of carbohydrate as well as protein. So you don't have to have, loads of rice and pasta and pizza, etc., etc.
That's what we used to be told, didn't it? You're going to be doing all this working out, plate of spaghetti bolognese, get in there, get your pastas, get your, your glucose stores filled up.
Yeah. I mean, you do need carbohydrate, but likewise, you can get that from a whole range of different food
sources.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've got no problem with children wanting a little bit of, bagel or, pasta.
Mine get some white rice. Mine get some potatoes and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, just.
I don't eat sweet potatoes. I try.
What I would say is watch how you give it to them. So give it to them with a good source of protein, because that again will slow down the rate of release. And likewise, I have clients with some very complicated digestive needs, and quite frankly, they can't cope with any fiber. So they, that's the sort of times when actually some white rice cooked, say, in coconut milk or something to give some extra fat actually can be very useful for them, because they just can't digest. They've got various digestive health conditions. But what I would say is, if they're over the 3-4-year-old age and their digestion is not compromised that of, then there's no reason why they can't do whole grain rice or quinoa or buckwheat or millet, which are very nutritious. And if you're avoiding gluten, they're gluten-free. Teff is a very good one. I mean, I've started using teff, which is a gluten-free grain from Ethiopia, very high in protein.
I've never heard of teff.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So yes, it's what we call a pseudo grain, a bit like the quinoa, but it's more of a grass than a grain. But it's very high in protein, and it contains a reasonable amount of calcium, magnesium, and iron. And you can use it as a grain, so you can cook it a bit like you would cook quinoa or rice. But equally, you can use it to make breads. So I've just made a chocolate banana teff bread, which is really high in protein. So, I mean, you know, you can get, so what I would say is, you know, think about things like porridge oats or oat cakes. If you're not paleo breads are great, you know, because they still contain carb, but they've got quite a lot of protein in, because often they're used making eggs, for, you know, with eggs, for example. But whole grain rice, quinoa, millet, all of these are useful for children as part of the meal. Now, if you look at the Eat Well plate, they still are emphasizing that every meal should be based around carbohydrates. I have a problem with that, because the carbohydrates that they are showing in that yellow category do not include the veg. Well, I'm sorry, but vegetables are carbohydrates. And
veggies should be in here, shouldn't they?
Yeah, and you know, sweet potatoes should be there, butternut squash should be there, beetroot, carrots should be there. And that if we did that, we would meet not only the 5 a day, which again I have problems with. We should be getting 8 a day easily, you know. And if we could include more carbohydrate, which are vegetables, we would probably do that quite easily. And you know, we talked about, well, you know, do kids really like them? But I've made loads of sweet potato crisps, which I've just tossed in olive oil and baked in the oven. The kids love it. I often will mash up butternut squash or carrots and use it like you would potato on, you know, a sort of shepherd's pie. Yeah. You can, I mean, I've just made a pumpkin seed nut butter, or pumpkin nut butter, where I basically blended up toasted pecans with some butternut squash, cinnamon, a little bit of xylitol, and made a nut butter which has got huge amounts of pumpkin in. The kids love it, so they use it as a spread. So there's lots of ways you can do it. You can make your own pesto and bung in a load of kale. They don't know it's in there, or spinach, you know. So there are ways that you can cram more of it in. And I think we just have to sometimes be a bit more inventive with kids. Yeah. You know, soup's a great way.
Yes. And do you know what I think? In my experience as a parent, I think the biggest problem that we get with children's plate is that we fill it with veg, and then add a little few bits around it. Like there's a bit of broccoli. There's like a stem of broccoli and a little bit of meat and a heap of pasta. And that is the basis that we're building our meals on. And I think that's where the shift needs to happen, where I think parents need to realize that you shouldn't use that as the base. Don't use your meat. Use your veg as your base.
Absolutely.
And a little bit of carbs on the side. Yeah, no, it's not going to kill them. And paleo, non-paleo, you know, at the end of the day, you need to feed them.
Yeah.
They need to get food into them. But it's about getting a balance and pushing more fruit and veg, especially veg, onto that plate and not having it as an accessory.
Yeah, absolutely right. You're so right. So I would say, look at their plate, whatever size it is, half of it should be veg. Okay, so that, now I don't actually care whether they've used a bag of frozen mixed vegetables or whether they've used a bag of ready prepared cut up salad. If you have not got time, and in fact, frozen veg, it's worth saying, often has more nutrients than fresh stuff, because
it's flash frozen, isn't it? Right from
frozen, and all. I mean, obviously it depends how you then cook it, but if you quickly blanch it or steam it, it's actually going to be probably much healthier than a lot of the fresh stuff out there, unless you've got your own garden allotment, for example. So half your plate vegetables, and ideally not just a plate of peas. Try and get 2 or 3 different things on there, and variety absolutely will give you more vitamins and antioxidants. And then a quarter of your plate for a child should be the protein, and then if they need the carb, put the other quarter as the carb. And that could also be veg. It could have been butternut squash, you know, sweet potato, carrots, beetroot, any of the starchy stuff. And you could just do a whole tray of, say, roasted parsnips, sweet, you know, whatever you can have. Just roast it in some garlic and olive oil. You know, the kids love it. It's fantastic. Yeah. The other thing to say is, because I'm saying this because I have a teenager and I've got 2 that are just coming into that stage as well. Teenagers often will gravitate to more late nights. and they will go to bed later, and we know that this is part of the hormonal changes going on. They still need the sleep though, so you need to make sure they're not having problems compromising sleep, because that will affect their growth. But the reason I'm saying is that they often will probably need a late night snack, because the whole of their pattern is shifting, and they're still often working 9-10 o'clock at night, because they're studying for their A-levels or whatever. So you may need, and if you find your child suddenly starts at any age waking up or finds it difficult to get to sleep, just check, are they getting enough food in the evening? Because if you're giving them, say, a tea at 5 and they don't eat again, their blood sugar has probably already crashed before they're even in bed. And when that happens, what happens is your body will release cortisol, which is your stress hormone, but it's also your waking up hormone, and it will block melatonin, which will mean they can't sleep well. So what I often suggest is an hour before they go to bed, whether that's 7, 8, depending on when they're going to bed, give them a small snack. It doesn't mean a massive meal, but it could just be a handful of nuts and seeds, a couple of oat cakes, some slices of chicken, or some leftovers, from what's in the fridge, or a piece of fruit with some nuts, but always include some protein and a bit of carb. And that will helpfully see them through the night. If they are waking up in the night, that could be a cortisol waking up surge. So just think, why are they starting not to sleep well? It might be that you've increased exercise, or they've done an extra class, or they didn't eat that much in the evening that night. That's when they will need that sort of evening snack.
Okay. Now, there's one other thing that I want to discuss quickly just before we finish off, and that is supplementation with children, because we've very quickly touched on vitamin D, that getting sufficient vitamin D from the sun is very difficult. How do you know as a parent, does my child need supplementation? What do they need supplementation in? What do I give them? What types do I give them? How much? Like, why would you decide? Because I think, majority of parents who supplement probably go to the shops, get the children's multivitamins off the side that are the little chewable things that are like candies, and think, okay, well, I'm going to give them a multivitamin. They don't eat tons of veg. That'll see them through.
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question. I've actually written a blog about supplementation and children on my website. So if anyone's interested,
our Facebook page as well.
Have a look at that. But the first thing I would say is, I would say most people need to supplement. Because our diets, however healthy we think we are, the nutrient status of a lot of the vegetables, the fruits, the grains, the food that we're eating is often not as good as it perhaps was 50 years ago, partly because the soils are so depleted and our selenium's low, etc., etc. And it can be very hard to make sure it is nutritionally balanced from day to day. So it may well be that, yes, your child could benefit. I would say 2 key things that we know from the research. Vitamin D is often low. Get them tested. Just do a skin prick test, or ask the GP to do it and check their levels. And then you can get sublingual drops. You can get little chews that are just purely vitamin D3. If they are not eating much dairy, or they're dairy-free, consider whether they do need extra calcium and maybe magnesium. If they don't like oily fish, it is likely they will benefit from an omega supplement. And remember, this is when they are growing and developing. Their brains are 60% fat. And that fat, a lot of it is omega-3. And if you are not giving them DHA and EPA, which is from oily fish, then I suggest it would be worth doing an omega-3 supplement as well. I don't know whether they would really benefit from a multi, because like you've just said, a lot of the children's multis are quite frankly rubbish. In clinic, I do use certain supplements for children, but I generally tailor it and personalize it to the individual depending on their signs and symptoms. If a child has just started their periods and is going through horrendous PMS, then they may benefit from certain supplements like evening primrose oil, B6 and magnesium, for example, but that's very tailored to them. If they have a lot of eczema, gamma linoleic acid, GLA, can be very useful, along with the omega-3s and vitamin A and vitamin D. But I would say if you're in doubt, then I would seek support from a professional. But certainly look at the calcium, look at the vitamin D, iron, particularly if they are very fatigued and don't concentrate and they're off their meat, and then look at the omegas as well.
Okay. Excellent. Would your normal GP look for these types of things normally?
No, not at all. They might, if they are struggling with energy, and you say to your GP, look, they don't really eat any meat, then they probably will check for iron and ask them to do ferritin, because ferritin is our iron store. And often iron can look normal, but the store is going down and down. Okay. If they often get infections and maybe have a long-term health condition like celiac disease, they should also test for vitamin D. It's unlikely they will, because, and rightly so, they will probably say, well, actually, about 80% of the population are low in vitamin D. But the reason I say get it tested is that I have seen a few cases of people taking a supplement and going toxic with vitamin D because they never knew what their baseline was. So for £30, it's worth just getting a home spot test kit, which I sell on my website anyway. Okay. You know, just get yourself tested before you start whapping loads of supplements in, because you could go toxic with vitamin D. It's fat soluble and therefore we store it. Yeah.
Okay. What about children and fermented foods? Things like kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. Can they have as much as they want? Do you need to limit the amount?
I mean, again, remember that some, like kombucha, can be quite sugary. Not all brands. There are some very good low sugar brands out there. And so just watch the acid and the sugar, particularly for their teeth. But yeah, but I know, I mean, I'm a big fan of fermented foods, as you know. I would like them to have some every day. Now, it doesn't mean they should eat the whole pot of sauerkraut, because they'll probably start, you know.
Mine love sauerkraut.
But I would say, you know, if you can get them to eat a small bowlful every day of a homemade yogurt or kefir or sauerkraut, brilliant, because what you are doing is you're re-inoculating the gut with beneficial bacteria. And, you know, every day we are exposed to toxins, whether that's, you know, in our environment, in our food, and our guts are very vulnerable to changes in the microflora. And if we can re-inoculate them on a daily basis, that will benefit not only our gut, but our long-term health. And obviously that's something we'll talk about when I come down to Primal Roost
and do our gut health talk. But it's really important as well, because, you know, children and the schools are the kid, you know, a bug gets into the school, they all get ill. All of these things that through diet, through having these fermented foods, by having those prebiotics and helping their guts, it's going to help with their immunity. So
absolutely.
Through the things you're putting on their plate and giving them to eat, it is going to affect their health, their susceptibility to getting ill, how well they're responding, how quickly they're recovering. All of these things are interlinked just by what you're feeding them, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, remember, of course, 70% of your immune system is in your gut. Yeah. So that's another reason for, you know, really making sure that we keep it healthy. And, you know, children's diets, you know, can be quite high in refined foods and sugar, which can feed, unfortunately, you know, bad bacteria, you know, harmful yeast and so on. So, you know, there's another reason for re-inoculating. And if, of course, your child has just recently taken antibiotics, which will wipe out pretty much everything, that's another reason for, you know, going in there with fermented foods, because it's a natural way. You know, for cultures for centuries take fermented foods as a daily basis because that's what they did, because it was a way of preserving food. It's only now we're starting to say, way, you know, this is really exciting stuff. Actually, most cultures have done it for centuries, you know, it's part of
and it's completely, not everything's fermented, you know, purely because it was also economical to have all the food.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to integrate these things, because it's funny, because you see it often in schools that, you know, the same children that get ill over and over and over. And these foods that we feed our kids can help so much with boosting that immunity and making their health so much better.
Yeah, it has a profound effect on, you know, your day-to-day sense of well-being, but also longer term for neurotransmitters, for hormones, for immune system, you know, for inflammation in the body. You know, if you've got a child that's got an allergy, have a look at the gut health, because, you know, your gut modulates your immune system. So an allergy is an expression of an immune system that is not working as it should be.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, honestly, I could go on forever. We could this topic, especially with children, I think it's such an important one, because, you know, we're breeding the next generation, and the things that we can get into them is going to have such an impact on, you know, the next generations then. And already, you know, you're seeing a shift. Our generation, there's a shift from our parents, and we're trying to be more aware. And what we do with our children is going to have a huge impact. So I think so important to get to grips with what a children's diet should look like, and teach them these things so that they can learn to make good decisions for themselves.
Absolutely. I mean,
with these diseases that we are.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as a parent, it's the greatest love you can show a child is to nourish them from within. You know, that if you love your child, you will give them great food, because that's nourishing them now and in the future. And that's what I say to my kids. It's because I love you that I want you to eat healthy food. Yeah. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't care. I love you so much that I want to nourish your body.
Yeah. No, that's exactly. I say the same thing to my children.
Right.
Mine get treats. I do take them out, and I give them treats when we're out, when we're doing things. But, you know, I think it's really important. They need to learn to make good decisions. They need to learn this is a good choice, this is a bad choice. And, you know, that it's down to us.
Yeah. And it's getting, like you say, it's getting the foundation right. Yeah. And, you know, we have to lead by example. We cannot expect our kids to eat healthy if we're downing a can of Coke and a packet of crisps every day. Yeah, exactly. It's just not logical, you know, for them. You know, they've got to see us eating healthily and having the health and vitality that we are telling them that they can have through food.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. Well, let's wrap up there. We said we were going to keep this to 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, I'm going, right, we're going to wrap this up.
Yes.
Better. The problem is there's just so much to say and so little time. Now, I believe our next time we'll be joining everybody here will be Tuesday, April 26th, because we meet on the last Tuesday of the month, every month, 12 p.m. So we will be here April 26th. And then not long after that, the following month, you can actually come down to Primal Roost and find Christine there. Ask her all your questions. We've got a multiple range of her books. Her new book will be in by then as well. She can give you a signed copy.
And I'm sure Simeon will be there with his fermented foods for you as well.
Fantastic. And maybe some more treats as well to sell.
Yes, I'm sure.
Some there as well. And that kimchi, I saw the kimchi on your
lovely
the other day. That looked brilliant. So excellent. Well, thank you everybody who joined us. This broadcast you'll be able to watch on Facebook pages. You can go to the Primal Roost website and rewatch it as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Christine, for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on the 26th of April. Take care, everybody.